to be there.
Soon, dear, soon.
Nice music, huh, sweetie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody, let's get prepared.
Head out on the highway, looking for adventure, and whatever comes our way. Yeah, gotta go make it happen.
Dad, are we there yet?
Don't bother me while I'm driving. I'm trying to concentrate. Look out!
I'm Liz Walker. Preparing to drive in Boston often requires that we figuratively gird ourselves for battle, always ready to engage in the constant car wars. There are a lot of obstacles to peaceful driving in the city. Inadequate parking, poor signs, bad roads, and constant traffic jams. Tonight, we will look at the complex problem of driving in the city of Boston. We will look at two major areas that make driving in the city a nightmare: bad roads and bad attitudes, because it is those two things that are making Boston drivers wild in the streets.
Take a look at the roads. They're terrible, in terrible condition. That's why we ought to leave the Cadillac at home.
I'm from LA and I've never seen crazier drivers in my life.
Does it help to use your head when driving in Boston? Do you sometimes feel like doing this to the driver next to you? Is this the best way to find a parking space at your favorite downtown store? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone. Boston is in the midst of a traffic crisis. How does the city get stuck in this eternal traffic jam? The popular belief is that the haphazard layout of our streets was the work of cows wandering to the Boston Common. But Northeastern professor William Holton's research has proved otherwise.
What is probably the case is that people built their homes in a scattered pattern around the center of town, wherever they thought a good spot of land was. And then paths were worn in the grass from those homes to the center of town. And you got a sort of spider web pattern with the paths extending down to the waterfront and others connecting them in a kind of circular fashion, but not really well planned because it just happened to develop that way.
City streets that made perfect sense to 18th century Bostonians have become a 20th century nightmare. And to compound the problem, we make things worse with poor road upkeep, a lack of signs, and a refusal to comply with the way the rest of the country travels the roads. For example, rotaries were originally designed for the slow-moving cars of the 20s, yet they are still a major part of our road system.
Rotaries are fun. People in the rest of the country don't know the sheer pleasure of going down the highway 95 miles an hour, semi-truck barreling down on your rear end, probably carrying nuclear waste or something. All of a sudden the traffic goes into a little loop-de-loop. What's that? It's a rotary, a circle in the middle of the highway. No reason. All the traffic goes in, some of it comes out.
We all joke about Boston driving, and maybe that's why Ira Gershkoff and Richard Trackman have made big bucks making light of our traffic problems. Their book, Wild in the Streets, is in its 5th printing, and though it is quite funny, it is based on the sad truth of our traffic problems. We took a ride with them wild style.
The question that we have, and one that we've raised in the book, is who has the right of way in the rotary. There's conflicting authority. In one area of your Massachusetts driver's manual, it says that cars already in the rotary have the right of way. But then we know that the general rule of thumb is that traffic on the right has the right of way, and that's the traffic entering the rotary. So which is it?
Well, it's whoever pushes themselves forward first.
I have the right of way. Ah, the obscure blinking green. That is one of the great untold mysteries of the Boston area. And frankly, although we've noted their existence, I think it just tells you that the traffic signal is in working order that day. Here we have the Boston phenomenon known as the blinking red light. Folks from other parts of this country probably wouldn't know what to do here. But seeing as how we've all spent time in Boston, we know that that means stop.
If you had the feeling that we do things a little differently here, you're right. The Uniform Vehicle Code is an ideal set of rules and regulations written by the National Committee on Vehicle Traffic Laws. In 1981, the committee compared and rated the traffic laws in the 50 states to the Vehicle Code, and Massachusetts came in, you guessed it, dead last.
Good. Well, I'm not pleased to hear that. It's too bad. It suggests very strongly that we have a way to go, and I'd like to be helpful in that regard here in the city of Boston. It's too bad.
Ignoring or not understanding the rules of the road makes driving on what are already bad roads worse. Our bad roads are the result of a 1960s state and city policy of deferred maintenance. That means fix it later. And we're paying for that deferral now. Look at the Massachusetts Avenue Bridge. In 1983, inspectors found cracks in the 93-year-old hangar supporting the bridge and closed one lane of traffic in each direction. 3 years later, no progress has been made, and little wonder when you look at all the different agencies that are involved. According to the MDC, the lanes will not be reopened until 1989. It's hard to get anything done with all the agencies trying to work together. Jim Carlin, Secretary of Transportation under Edward King, learned the politics of potholes when he tried to get some filled near the Embassy Suites Hotel.
So I called the DPW. I said, you know, would you go out and fix the damn potholes? Oh, Mr. Carlin, we can't do that. That's a City of Boston problem because Western Avenue is a City of Boston. So we call it City of Boston. They said, well, it's really a mass pipe because so many feet from their entrance and their roads, it's a mass pipe. And then somebody said, well, no, really, Storrow Drive is controlled by the MDC. And the bottom line was that the damn potholes never get fixed because it was always somebody else's job.
In Boston, it's always someone else's job. Just look at all the agencies in the transportation picture. Below is the infamous Storrow Drive. On a nice day like this, traffic can be backed up for miles. But on a wet, rainy day, the road is flooded, frustrating, and downright dangerous.
It's a real mess. That's Storrow Drive, Boston.
It's just when I cut out the people who can't handle the driving here. That's why they have things like Storrow Drive. Oh, yeah. You're proud of Storrow Drive, aren't you? Yeah. The world's most famous traffic jam. I was stuck there for 8 hours one day. Looked to my right. Some wise guy put up a condominium. He's got signs that say, if you lived here, you'd be home now.
Everyone sees these signs, but these others seem to be less obvious, at least to truck drivers.
Everybody said there's signs up there, but I did not see no signs. I wasn't looking for any signs.
Each year, almost 40 trucks are stuck under these bridges, and almost 300 others back up right before the bridge, tying up traffic for miles. Perhaps we need height barriers to prevent trucks from even entering Storrow or Memorial Drives. The signs just are not doing the job, here on Storrow Drive or in the city of Boston. Lack of street signs contributes to driver frustration and city congestion as people travel in circles trying to figure out where they are. It is ironic that a city that encourages tourism and is a home to a huge out-of-town student population makes it nearly impossible to get around. You can drive for miles on a main thoroughfare and never know what street you're on. A perfect example is Kenmore Square, though there are no signs that tell you where you are. 3 streets intersect and not one of them is clearly marked. Set back hundreds of feet from the intersection is a sign that looks as if Com Ave runs into Beacon, but in fact they are separate, distinct streets.
The street name signs there are something, if they're not up, they should be up, and we obviously are going to do something about that.
That was the Parking and Traffic Commissioner's response over 2 months ago, but here in Kenmore Square, nothing has changed. It has taken the city 2 years to reorganize the traffic and parking department and to establish a plan of action. Part of the problem is at the sign shop. Only 12 men make and install our city signs, and often they do it inefficiently. Like this one, placed outside an intersection. It's impossible to see. Hooked to an Edison pole. The city saved the cost of a new pole. That may help the city, but certainly not the driver. A special bus was designed to make signs on site, but it is only operative during the warm weather because the heating system is inadequate. In addition, what the city really needs is more map-like signs that tell you where you are and where you're going. I asked the mayor about that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be in my jurisdiction. I really am not, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. That would not be my field. That would be the Traffic and Planning Department of the City of Boston.
So we asked the Parking and Traffic Commissioner about map signs.
The city's transportation department isn't responsible, for example, to put large signs in Kenmore Square saying you are now in Kenmore Square. We put directional signs in place for various municipal buildings, for instance, to City Hall.
But even in a trip to City Hall, we couldn't find one sign that says City Hall. With all the different agencies involved, no one will take responsibility of getting good directional signs up, except in one area of town, the medical area. Why are there such clear signs here? They were privately funded, designed and built by the hospitals. So what will it take to get the job done?
All it takes to get something like signing done is for the governor of the state of Massachusetts and the mayor of the city of Boston to put it high enough on the priority list and to have the resolve to insist that it be done.
We may not agree whose responsibility signs are, but one thing is certain, we have to get together to put up some decent signs.
I couldn't find my way around this place if I tried. Terrible signs.
Well, maybe it's a great way of learning to pray. Driving Boston traffic, whatever your faith may be. But, prayers are required if you want to make it.
Frank McNamara is one of 2 million commuters who enters the city each day. He commutes 200 miles a week from his home in Bolton, Massachusetts. Like all commuters, Frank has his share of war stories, like the time his wife Elizabeth was about to give birth to their 5th child.
The adrenaline created by the terrible stress of traffic jams on the way to the hospital to deliver a baby caused my wife's entire inner birthing mechanism to shut right down. So we got to the hospital 2 hours after we left the house, which took us an hour and 15 minutes longer than it should have, and my wife was absolutely cold and no longer in labor.
Frank's baby daughter finally did arrive into this world 13 hours later.
Men are men and not angels. We get irritated and aggravated, and we start hammering away at the steering wheel and making obscene gestures to other drivers and cursing people behind us and in front of us, particularly those in front of us. What had started out as a day with such promise is now reduced to a very, very irritating day because it's not even 8 o'clock in the morning yet, and already the hop is off my fastball. I'm exhausted.
Getting to work can be a battle when traveling on our overburdened highways. For example, the Central Artery Bridge was built for 104,000 cars a day and now carries 176,000. That's like the populations of Lexington, Framingham, and Newton coming into the city at once. And it's the same story on all our other highways. In 1949, Bruce Campbell's first job out of MIT was design work on the expressway.
Now you're looking at the Central Artery on a typical Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. It's very much backed up and causing a lot of congestion. This highway was built by the standards, the engineering standards of the late 1940s, which did not involve acceleration and deceleration lanes. did not take into account the merging and weaving of traffic.
This is far and away the worst piece of interstate highway in the country. There'll always be congestion in a city like Boston, but what we're headed for is 12-hour-a-day traffic jams if we don't fix this.
Governor Michael Dukakis and his Secretary of Transportation, Frederick Salvucci, believe the key component to our traffic solution is widening and depressing the Central Artery and building a third harbor tunnel. It is now up to the Congress to decide how that project will be funded. For the first time, almost everyone is in agreement, except for some neighborhoods like the North End, which would have to endure 12 to 15 years of construction. The building boom and the traffic it brings are a source of concern to the residents of Boston. In the last 5 years, over 5 million square feet of prime office space has been added. To cope with traffic new developments create, the mayor has requested that all new projects work with the Boston Redevelopment Authority to agree on measures new developers must take to minimize traffic problems. Case in point, the BRA and developers of the New England Life building on Boylston Street in Back Bay came up with a plan the city heralded as a model. But in reality, it's not when you compare it to the specifications in the original proposal. Here are just a few examples. The BRA wanted the developers to, 1, provide satellite parking and free shuttle buses for construction workers, 2, provide free T-passes for tenants in the building, 3, operate free shuttle buses to subway connections for tenants of the building. Instead, the developers agreed to, 1, attempt to find satellite parking, 2, to sell T-passes, 3, and finally, they struck from the agreement the shuttle buses to the subway, as well as many other good ideas already working in other cities.
All of these ideas were gutted in the negotiation process between the city and New England Life, so that there are now very, very few meaningful measures left in the mitigation plan. As far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of vague promises, nothing that we can count on to deal adequately with the traffic impacts of the project.
The traffic impact will be tremendous as new developments draw more and more people into the city. But our economic boom may be a bust. Who wants to put a business in the city when getting into the city is a major traffic headache?
Well, it's the only way I can get a spot. I usually come into work about an hour early, and I sit here and just wait for something to open up. And a couple other cars will double park too, but it's a matter of who gets the first spot. Hopefully this car next to me will be pulling out soon.
Double, triple parking, unloading trucks at peak traffic hours, those are just the little things that cause big problems. Breaking the law has become commonplace. In West Roxbury, Girl Scout Troop 9168 was concerned about safety at their crosswalk. They counted 82 cars going through red lights in only 15 minutes. Why are the rules so easy to break? Probably because, as the Wild in the Streets author says, you can only get a ticket if you hit something that can vote.
Total number of motor vehicle violations that we issued last year, 1985, in the entire city of Boston. Now, these are motor vehicle violations, which include your red light, speeding, one-way violations, failure to use, turn signals, violations that impact on the movement of vehicles. We issued 96,758. That's up over 10,000 from what we issued in 1984.
That may seem like a lot of tickets until you compare it to other cities similar in population to Boston. San Francisco handed out 195,000 tickets. Atlanta, smaller than Boston, handed out 185,000.
Think about that.
I think it's rotten.
Why?
Why?
Park at a crosswalk.
Because they should be like hanging around dangerous places and not bothering people doing their job.
Lax law enforcement goes hand in hand with lax attitudes. Behind the wheel, Dr. Jekyll becomes Mr. Hyde.
They're animals by the time they get here. They're just like animals. These are young girls. And the things that they call each other, when one car cuts in front of them, and they can't go anywhere. The ramp is sitting almost like a parking lot. And if one car cuts in front of them, they're like animals, swearing, cursing.
I love driving in the city, but I mean, I'm a little nuts anyway in that respect.
And it's crowded, no parking, and sometimes you don't know what to do with the car. Sometimes you just feel like never come to Boston.
Okay, we've got bad roads, bad traffic, but we also have another major problem: bad attitudes. People seem to do things while driving on the streets of Boston that they wouldn't dream of doing anywhere else. Sometimes we do things on the road so unbelievable that it does seem funny. But a lot of people don't realize it's also very dangerous. It may be that the joke's on us.
I love Boston, though. How many people agree with me that Boston drivers are totally insane? And how many of you are proud of it, too? Look at this guy. I killed several small children today.
I've seen cars go through lights when they were red and yellow. Not just one car that actually forced its way through, but 4, 5, and 6.
You know, if you're in the South, you run somebody off the road, they will shoot you. In Boston, you run somebody into a ditch, they go, "You got me."
People will definitely try to, would rather have you go off the road than let you in a lane, stuff like that, you know. So it was a little shocking, but now I'm kind of right in the swing of it all.
I drive by intuition until I hit a mall. This Boston traffic, everybody drives me up the wall. I'm a Boston driver, has to be a joke. A Boston driver, I'm easy to provoke.
The Boston driver is easy to provoke. Dr. Kernan Mannion, a psychiatrist from Lexington, says there are two main reasons that people do such crazy things on the road.
One is the road system itself creates the mentality that you're in a war and you have to win. In Boston, the road system is very adversarial. You have 4 lanes merging into one, and so the system itself is adversarial. And I think what that does is that creates an adversarial driver who says, I'm going to get my way.
Once the adversarial driver takes to the streets, any other vehicle or obstacle is his or her enemy. Dr. Natasha Vargas says that there are a lot of drivers engaging in this kind of antisocial behavior.
I think it's an activity we all are engaged in. There's a sense of consensus about being kind of bad drivers. And again, there's a sense of detachment from the cost and the harm it could do people.
Our roads are becoming more and more unsafe because of our bad driving habits. Dr. Vargas says that a sense of entitlement contributes to this problem, but that in most cases, bad driving is simply a learned behavior.
Again, I think it has to do with their sense of consensus that anything goes. And so we have learned this behavior. I mean, you learn to be a bad driver in Boston through observation. Everyone else is a bad driver. And people begin to feel a sense of pride in this activity that anywhere else would be, people would be very critical of.
People feel anonymous behind the wheel of a car and express what Dr. Vargas calls closet behaviors. Things like giving people the finger, blowing a horn nonstop, or cutting people off. Things people would never do if they were face to face with another person.
And also, you could get in trouble yourself. We never know who's behind the wheel of that other car.
Heidi, who asked that we not use her last name, didn't know who was behind the wheel of the car behind her when she got stuck in a gridlock at Chinese Corner. Her fortune here was not very good.
And I was stuck in traffic for at least 10 minutes. There was a car that someone was leaning on the horn in this car non-stop, just leaning on the horn, and it kind of was getting to me. So I turned to give him the wave sign to please stop, and the guy, he looks at me, I can see him mouth the words, "Give me the finger," and continue leaning on his horn.
To make a long story short, the following day in an elevator, Heidi ran into this same man who just happened to be the vice president of the company where she worked as a freelance artist, and a follow-up confrontation ensued.
So as a result, he had me fired.
There are a number of incidents across the country, not only in Boston, where people have actually killed one another on the roads after an argument, usually related to some traffic problem. So people really do get upset about driving.
Dr. Jack Levin, a professor of social psychology at Northeastern University, says certainly the feeling of anonymity is a contributing factor to the bad attitudes on the roads. In this introductory sociology class, however, he brings up a more basic issue.
This is not a course on driving. It is a sociology course, and so one of the things that I talk about a lot is conformity.
Conformity. When Dr. Levin first moved to Boston, he tells this class, he thought there were no rules on the roads. Then he learned otherwise.
There are rules of the road. They're not the ones that you find in the law books. They're not written down someplace, but we all know them. You only have to be here 6 months to know what the rules are. In fact, if you don't know, you won't be able to drive in Boston.
Here are just a few of the unwritten rules in Boston. Red means slow down. Yellow means speed up. And green means stop because someone else is probably running a red light. These unwritten rules are life-threatening in reality.
You also have to deal with the attitudes that people have, the drivers. They have to begin to see that bad driving is deviant behavior, that it's something that has to stop because it's dangerous, because it's hazardous, because it's bad for you.
We were just driving in and the traffic just stopped. The lights came on and he stopped and the car behind us just...
We were just sitting here, waiting, for her to be able to go. And next thing you know, this guy slammed into me. She had to slow down because the MDC truck was backing up and she couldn't get around him.
They go too fast on this road, though. I really think they do. I don't know what the speed limit is, but they go too fast.
These people walked away from this collision on Storrow Drive. Others aren't quite so lucky. This radio call from the ambulance lets the emergency room staff at the Massachusetts General Hospital know that an accident victim is on the way.
No questions over. Expecting you on arrival.
Are you having any trouble catching your breath, sir?
No, not really.
Where are you hurting now?
My neck behind my right ear. I'm sorry, Chief.
Yeah, I have the bar. I just need the suit. Okay, breathe normally now. We need his pants and stuff off, too, please. Okay. Is the sensation normal on your legs? Did you call for scum? No, sir. You can feel me touching both sides of your legs?
No.
It's not. Okay.
God almighty.
These things usually have to strike home before anybody realizes that it is a significant problem. And when it affects you is when you begin to take a little bit more care. I would tell you that daily, everyday driving can cause trauma and can cause accidents. You may be driving carefully, but that doesn't mean the guy next to you is.
I think that people are afraid of getting caught, not afraid of getting hurt.
More and more, the plastic surgeon is being considered part of the trauma team. Dr. Guy Rockman is called to Mount Auburn Hospital after the patient has been stabilized. When someone's face goes through a windshield or hits a dashboard, surgery is performed for more than cosmetic reasons.
Do you have any micro instruments? Patients with severe facial fractures need to be addressed early. Fractures involving this area or fractures involving the frontal bone can potentially communicate directly with the brain. There can be a communication through the nose with the leaking of cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid that bathes the brain, coming in direct contact with the outside air. So the risk of meningitis and brain infections is significant in fractures like that.
Plastic surgeons don't have wands that we rub over faces and and the scars are gone forever. But there are procedures that we can do to make them less noticeable.
It is, however, the scars which remain a constant reminder of a catastrophic chain of events.
Fine.
Often people return to have those scars repaired.
When was the last time I saw you?
Say, a couple of months ago.
What is the constant reminder is the fact that their face doesn't look the same or it doesn't feel the same. There's some numbness. Things just aren't the way they used to be.
This patient was driven off the road as he was riding a bike. He hit a pothole. This injury is much like the injury that results from a face hitting a dashboard.
Fluid moving. How about where we made the incision on the top of your head?
I don't feel anything there.
That really is healed very well.
While this man's initial surgery was to save his life, the follow-up surgery will be cosmetic in nature. He is one of the lucky ones. He is able to see, to think, to walk, even to ride a bike again if he should ever wish to do so. Others aren't quite so fortunate.
When you're in traffic, one of the things that really bothers me is people don't seem to be conscious of other cars around them.